You walked into your kitchen this morning and saw them again, the little brown trail along the baseboard, maybe a roach scurrying behind the toaster. And you stood there, coffee in hand, doing the math in your head. $200 for the exterminator, $300, $400 a year, quarterly visits, annual contracts. A truck in your driveway every 90 days with a man in a uniform spraying something he will not let you read the label of. Before you write that next check, stop. Put the phone down. 3 years ago, I sat at a kitchen table in Holmes County, Ohio, and watched a 70-year-old Amish woman scoop a fine white powder into a tin like she was measuring flour. She reached into her cupboard and pulled music out a plain glass jar, white powder inside, and told me that jar had kept her farmhouse free of pests for 40 years. The house was built in 1889. Nobody in her family had called an exterminator in over 100 years, and the mix in that tin cost less than $2 to make. One application. Done right. 12 months of protection. No spray, no truck, no contract. Ants in the pantry, roaches behind the refrigerator, silverfish in the bathroom, gone. If your home was built before 1980, this works better in your house than in any new build on the market. I will show you exactly why in a few minutes. This is not folklore. The active ingredient was used in American homes as early as 1860, sold in every general store in the country. And the refinement that makes it last for months instead of days comes from page 47 of a German-language household manual printed in 1908, called the Hausfreund. Almost no one alive today in this country has read it. I have, and by the end of this video, so will you. Let me back up and tell you how I got here, because I think you deserve to know I was the same kind of skeptic you probably are right now. I spent 32 years as a homeowner doing exactly what the television told me to do. Every spring, the same routine. Call the pest company, sign the contract, watch the man in the polo shirt walk around my foundation with a wand, write the check, smile, thank him. And 6 weeks later, the ants would be back in the pantry, marching in a thin line across the counter to the dog's food bowl, and I would tell myself the spray must be wearing off, and I would call them again. I paid that bill for 3 decades without ever once asking what was actually in the can he was spraying. I never read the safety sheet they left on the counter. I never asked why my dog would not walk on the lawn for 2 days after a treatment, or why the cat would sneeze for an afternoon. I just paid. It was easier to pay than to wonder. That is what they count on. They count on you being tired, being busy, being willing to write a check to make a small problem somebody else's responsibility. When I added it up one winter, sitting at the kitchen table with a shoebox full of receipts I had been throwing in a drawer for years, the number was somewhere north of $11,000. $11,000 to keep ants out of a kitchen and the occasional roach out of a basement. I felt sick. I sat there with my coffee going cold, and I did the math twice because I did not believe it the first time. And right around that same winter, I had started spending weekends with an Amish family I had met through a furniture maker I knew. Their name was Yoder. The grandfather was named Eli, like me, which is how we got to talking that first afternoon. Music. 2 old men named Eli at the same table. Their farmhouse was built in 1889. They had raised 7 children in it, and the children had raised children, and in over 130 years, nobody in that family had ever called an exterminator. Not once. Not $1 to a pest control company in more than a century. I asked Eli straight out, "How is that possible? Your house is older than mine by 60 years. You have a barn 50 FT from your back door. You have horses, chickens, a root cellar, a smokehouse, and a pantry that stands open to the kitchen air all year round. By every single rule I had been taught about how pests work, that house should have been crawling with them, and it was spotless. There were no traps in the corners, no glue boards under the sink, no little plastic bait stations tucked behind the refrigerator. I actually got down and checked, because I did not believe a house like that could be clean without something hidden somewhere. There was nothing." He laughed at me, the patient kind of laugh of a man who has watched English visitors be amazed by simple things his whole life, and he walked me over to a cupboard in the mudroom, and he pulled out that glass jar with the screw lid. Inside was a fine white powder mixed with something that looked like cornmeal and a few flakes of dried green herb. He said the recipe came from his grandmother, who got it from her grandmother, who used it in a Pennsylvania farmhouse before the Civil War. That jar, he told me, costs about $2 to fill. He refills it once a year, every fall, and that is the entire reason his family has never paid a pest control company in 130 years. I want to tell you exactly what is in that jar, and I will. But I need you to understand something first, because if I just hand you the recipe without the why, you will mix it up wrong, apply it in the wrong places, and decide it does not work. The reason this mix has been forgotten is not because it stopped working. It is because something replaced it that could be patented, bottled, branded, and sold to you on a recurring schedule. You cannot patent a kitchen ingredient. You cannot bottle something that costs pennies a pound at the feed store. So the industry did what industries do. They built a synthetic version, gave it a brand name, and let the original quietly disappear from store shelves and from memory. The base of the Amish mix is boric acid, plain, white, mineral boric acid. The kind that was sold in every American general store from the 1860s through about 1955 as an ordinary household staple. Sitting on the shelf right next to the baking soda and the washing powder, it cost pennies. Pioneers carried it west in their wagons. Your great-grandmother almost certainly had a tin of it in her pantry, and she used it for everything from cleaning to pest control without thinking twice. By weight, it is one of the most effective insecticides ever discovered, and the reason it works is beautiful in its simplicity. It works through two mechanisms at the same time. First, when an insect walks across the fine powder, the microscopic crystals abrade and scratch the waxy coating on the outside of its exoskeleton, the same waxy layer that seals moisture inside the bug's body. Once that coating is scratched, the insect Music begins to lose water and starts to dehydrate within hours, the same way you would dry out in a desert. Second, insects are compulsively clean. They groom themselves constantly, running their legs and antennae through their mouth parts, and in doing so, they swallow the powder and the boron compound goes to work, destroying their digestive system from the inside, dehydration from the outside, poisoning from the inside at the same time. And here is the part the chemical companies never want you to sit with for too long. There is no resistance. There is no immunity. An insect can evolve resistance to a chemical nerve agent over a few generations, the way bedbugs and roaches have evolved resistance to nearly everything sprayed at them since the 1950s. But an insect cannot evolve its way around being physically scratched open and dried out. It is mechanical, not chemical. A review out of the entomology department at a major land-grant university confirmed what your great-grandmother already knew in her bones. Boric acid remains highly effective against cockroaches even after many decades of continuous use in the same buildings, while a long list of the synthetic chemicals introduced in the 1950s have steadily lost their punch as the bugs adapted to them. The old mineral never stopped working. The expensive new chemicals are the ones that wore out. Now, I have to be straight with you about safety here, because the old-timers were casual about this and we should not be, and because somebody in the comments always raises it, and they are right to. Boric acid is low in toxicity compared to a modern pesticide spray, but it is not harmless and it is absolutely not food. If a child or a pet swallows a real amount of the prepared mix, that is a call to poison control, the same as if they got into the dishwasher detergent or a bottle of pills. I want to give you the actual numbers instead of a vague reassurance because specifics are what lets you make a real decision. The lethal dose for an adult is measured in tablespoons of pure powder swallowed directly all at once, which means trace contact. A dusting behind an appliance is not the danger, but a curious toddler with a spoon in an open bowl is a different story, and so is a dog that decides to lick up a pile of something sweet. So I do not want you getting casual and leaving this out in the open. The Amish answer to this was simple and I think brilliant, and it is the same answer I'm going to give you. You never leave this mix sitting out where anyone can get at it. You seal it into small, folded paper packets, the way they folded squares of newsprint with the corners pinched to the center, and you tuck those packets into places a child cannot reach and a dog cannot nose into. Behind the appliance, under the lip of the cabinet, inside the wall cavity behind an outlet, the insects chew right through the paper and get to the bait. Your family never sees it. It is a closed delivery system, and it has been used safely in farmhouses full of children and dogs and barn cats for well over a century, precisely because placement, not poison, is the whole game. Keep that one rule, and you have nothing to worry about. Now here's where the Amish refinement comes in, because boric acid by itself is just powder. Bugs do not seek out powder. They walk through it by accident. To turn it into a year-long solution, you have to give them a reason to seek it out, eat it, and carry it back to the colony or nest where it will kill everything they live with. The Yoder family mix uses 3 parts boric acid to 1 part fine sugar and 1 part cornmeal. The sugar is the bait. Ants, roaches, silverfish, earwigs cannot resist refined sugar. The cornmeal is the carrier that the bugs physically pick up and haul back to the nest in which they cannot properly digest. Combined with the boric acid, it becomes a delivery system that wipes out entire colonies, not just the scouts you see on your counter. Total cost to mix a pound of this at the grocery store today is under $2. That is enough to treat a 3-bedroom house for a full year. And if you cannot find pure boric acid, 20 Mule Team Borax from the laundry aisle is the same family of mineral and works at slightly reduced strength, so use about half again as much. If you only have granulated sugar, grind it in a coffee grinder for 30 seconds, and it behaves like the powdered kind. Music. The Amish swapped these same substitutes during the sugar rationing of the Second World War, and music, the mix, still worked. But the mix is only half the answer. Where you put it and how you put it is what separates the people who say, music, this does not work, from the people whose pest problems disappear overnight. This is the part almost nobody explains correctly. So pay close attention to what comes next, because this placement strategy came from watching 3 different Amish grandmothers in 3 different states do the exact same thing. and I realized they had all been taught the same hidden geography of a house. Most people who try boric acid hear about it, buy a box, and dump a pile of it under the kitchen sink. Then they wait, nothing happens. The ants keep coming. They throw the box away and call the exterminator. They blame the powder. The powder was never the problem. The problem is that they placed it where bugs do not travel. Bugs do not walk through the middle of a room. They do not stroll across your floor in plain view. Insects move along edges, corners, and cracks. And they prefer to keep their bodies in contact with two surfaces at once, like the seam where a baseboard meets a floor. If you watch a roach in slow motion, it never runs through open space if it can help it. It hugs the wall. It tucks into the corner where the cabinet meets the tile. Once you understand that, you stop wasting your powder. The Amish placement method has 6 points, and I want you to write these down or come back to this part of the video because following them exactly is the difference between a house that stays clean for a year and a house that is back to square one in 3 weeks. Point 1 is the gap between the back of the refrigerator and the wall. That dark, warm, slightly humid corridor behind your fridge where the motor runs and the coils throw off heat is highway 1 for every crawling pest in your kitchen. It is sheltered, it is warm, and it is never disturbed. A teaspoon of the mix dusted lightly along the wall behind the fridge will be crossed by every ant and roach that uses that route, which is all of them. Point 2 is the cabinet toe kick, the hollow recessed space underneath your lower cabinets where your toes go when you stand at the counter. Most homeowners do not even know that space is hollow. The bugs know. It is one of the most heavily traveled pest highways in any American home, a dark sealed tunnel running the entire length of your kitchen. Slide the mix back into that void with a thin spoon, or pull off the toe kick panel if it comes off and dust the whole run of it. Point 3 sounds completely backward when you first hear it. It is the top edge of your upper cabinets, up near the ceiling. Why would you put bug powder up high? Because roaches, contrary to everything most people assume, prefer high warm places when they are resting, and they climb to the tops of cabinets at night to do it. Dust the tops of your upper cabinets, the part you cannot see without a step stool, and you intercept them in their resting place, not just on the floor where you see them. Point 4 is the gap underneath, the dishwasher and the stove. These appliances sit in warm, often slightly damp recesses that are perfect harborage. Pull them out an inch if you can and dust the wall and floor behind them. Point 5 is the inside corners of any closet that shares a wall with the kitchen or the bathroom, especially a closet with a wood floor or a carpet edge because pests travel along the shared plumbing and wiring runs between those rooms. And point 6, the most overlooked of all, is the area under the bathroom sink where the pipes come through the wall along with every other pipe penetration in your house. That little ragged hole in the drywall where the water line or the drain enters, the one the plumber never sealed, is the front door for 9 out of 10 pest invasions. Dust around every one of them. The bugs are using those holes like you use your own front door and almost nobody ever thinks to close them. Now, if you already own a house and you think this only applies to new construction, stay with me because this next part is specifically for you, and it is the section I most wish someone had explained to me 20 years ago. The mix and the placement work in any house at any age, but if your home was built before 1980, you have a hidden advantage you do not even know about, and one specific vulnerability you should address this weekend. The advantage is this. Houses built before 1980 were almost universally constructed with real wood baseboards, plaster, or thick drywall, and what builders called natural cavities, the open spaces inside walls, between floor joists and around old pipes that modern construction tries to seal up tight with foam. Those cavities are exactly where pests build their long-term nests. In a brand new home with spray foam everywhere, the bugs have nowhere to hide and breed, but you also have nowhere to reach them. In an older home, you can take the cover off a wall outlet, dust a 1/4 teaspoon of the mix into the cavity behind the box, and screw the cover back on. That single placement, repeated at every outlet on an exterior wall, treats the entire wall cavity for a full year. The bugs that live inside your walls, and they are there whether you want to know it or not, walk through that mix and carry it through the nest, and the colony dies in place. Take a screwdriver, turn off the breaker for the room you're treating because you're not an electrician, and there's no reason to take a risk near live wiring. Unscrew the outlet cover. You will see a 1/2 inch of dark space around the electrical box. Use a small spoon or a squeeze bottle to puff a little of the mix into that gap. Replace the cover. Turn the breaker back on. Move to the next outlet. A typical older home has 15 to 25 outlets on exterior walls, and the whole job takes about 90 minutes the first time. Then you do not do it again for a year. The vulnerability of older homes is the sill plate, the horizontal piece of wood that sits directly on top of your foundation, where the wood of your house meets the concrete or stone. In homes built before 1980, that sill plate is often untreated lumber, and it is the single most common entry point for carpenter ants and overwintering pests like stink bugs and Asian beetles. From inside your basement or crawl space, follow the underside of the floor out to the wall, and you will see it. Using a paintbrush, dust a line of the mix along the top of the sill plate and along the inside of the foundation wall where it meets the sill. Done once a year, in October before the first hard frost, this intercepts the seasonal migration of every pest trying to overwinter inside your walls. There is one more application that works in any home, regardless of age, and it is the easiest of all. Take a small handful of the mix and tuck it into a folded coffee filter or a cut piece of pantyhose tied off with a twist tie. That is what the Amish call a bait pillow. The insects feed through it and carry the mix home, but a child cannot spill it and a dog cannot get into it. Tuck one behind the refrigerator, one under the sink, one in the back corner of the basement, one in the garage near the door to the house, and one in the attic if you have one. 6 of these little pillows protect a 4,000 SQFT home from every common crawling pest for a whole year for under $2. So, before I give you the last piece, the one ingredient I promised you at the very start that takes this mix from lasting months to lasting years, here is where everything I have gathered from these Amish kitchens lives in one place. Every recipe, every measurement, every placement point from this channel is collected in the description below in something called the Amish Home System. Now stay right here because this final ingredient is the part almost no one alive has read, and it is the difference between refilling your jar every year and refilling music it once every few years. Before I get to it, I need to talk for a moment about why this was buried. Because the answer matters, and it is not the cartoon version you might expect. If you go to the hardware store right now and look at the pest control aisle, you will see 100 bottles and sprays and traps and plug-in devices, and almost none of them list boric acid as the active ingredient. The few that do are tucked at the bottom of the shelf in small plain boxes that look like they belong in 1962 because, in a sense, they do. That is not an accident, and it is not quite a conspiracy either. It is something quieter and more ordinary than that. After the Second World War, the American chemical industry was sitting on a mountain of synthetic compounds that had been developed for the war effort, and they needed to find peacetime markets for all of it. The home pest control industry, as you know it today, the trucks and the contracts and the uniformed technicians, did not really exist before the late 1940s. It was built deliberately as a marketing channel for those new chemicals. The companies funded the trade associations. They wrote the training manuals for the brand new profession of exterminator. They lobbied state by state to have household pest treatment reclassified as a service that required licensing and equipment and recurring contracts, and to have boric acid reclassified from an ordinary household staple into a registered pesticide. And once it was a registered pesticide, the labeling and handling rules made it economically pointless for a grocery store to keep stocking a product that cost pennies. So the grocery stores stopped carrying it. By the mid-1960s, the average American home no longer had a tin of boric acid in the pantry. By 1980, most people under 40 had never even heard the word. It did not vanish because it failed. It vanished because there was no money in a thing you buy once and use for years. The Amish never participated in any of that for the simplest reason in the world. They were not watching the same television, not reading the same magazines stuffed with pesticide advertisements, not paying the quiet advertising tax that the rest of the country paid without ever noticing. When the general stores stopped carrying boric acid, the Amish just bought it in bulk from the agricultural supply houses that served farmers the same way they bought everything else. The knowledge passed unbroken, grandmother to mother to daughter, written down in the same plain notebooks they used for recipes and barn-raising dates, while the rest of America was busy forgetting. And now, here's what I promised you at the very start of this video. The one ingredient you can add to the basic mix that in dry indoor placements, the Amish say, extends its working life from about a year to several years. I found it on page 47 of that 1908 Hausfrauen manual in a recipe it calls Wunsenpulver, which simply means bug powder. The recipe is boric acid, sugar, and cornmeal in roughly the proportions I already gave you. But it lists one more ingredient that I have never seen in any modern pest control source, and that the Amish families I asked about it confirmed they still use to this day. Finally, ground dried bay leaf. Now, I want to be precise about this because this is where most people get it wrong when they hear it secondhand. Not whole bay leaves scattered loose in a cupboard, which is an old wives' trick that does almost nothing on its own. Powdered bay leaf, the dried leaves ground in a coffee grinder until they are the consistency of fine green flour, and then mixed into the boric acid blend at a ratio of about 1 part bay leaf powder to 10 parts of the total mix. Bay leaf carries natural aromatic compounds that insects genuinely dislike and tend to avoid, which adds a mild repellent quality to the bait. But the real reason it earns its place in the recipe is that it is antifungal, and it helps keep the whole mix from drawing in moisture and clumping up. This matters more than it sounds. Boric acid that sits in a humid kitchen or a damp basement will slowly absorb water out of the air and cake into hard little clumps. And once it clumps, it loses the loose, dusty, abrasive quality that lets it scratch an insect's shell. A clumped bait is a dead bait. The bay leaf powder helps keep the mix dry, loose, and lethal far longer, which is why the Yoder family refreshes their bait pillows only every few years, instead of every single year. The grandmother in Holmes County told me her own grandmother did exactly the same. Ground the bay leaf in a hand mill before they had a coffee grinder and folded it into the powder every time she mixed a fresh batch. Now, I'm going to be honest with you about the evidence because being honest about what I can and cannot prove is the whole reason this channel exists and the whole reason you can trust the rest of it. The antifungal properties of bay leaf, snorts, and its tendency to repel certain insects are documented in modern agricultural research. That part is real, and you can look it up. But the specific use of powdered bay leaf as a moisture stabilizer for a boric acid bait in a household setting appears, as far as I have ever been able to find after a year of looking, in exactly one place on this earth. That single page in a German-language household manual from 1908, kept alive not by scientists or corporations, but by plain families who simply kept doing the thing that worked year after year, and while the rest of the country was talked into chemicals it had to keep buying forever. So here's what you do this weekend. Go to the grocery store, buy a box of boric acid powder for about $1.50, or $20 Mule Team Borax if that is what they carry. Buy a small jar of bay leaves for about $2, and you will only use a quarter of it. Get a half cup of sugar and a half cup of cornmeal from your pantry. Grind the bay leaves in a coffee grinder for 30 seconds into a fine green powder. In a bowl, mix 3 cups of boric acid, 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of cornmeal, and half a cup of ground bay leaf, and stir until evenly combined. Store it in a glass jar with a tight lid in a dry cupboard. Fold your bait pillows, treat your outlets and your sill plate. Walk the 6 placement points. The whole project costs under $2 in materials you do not already own. Takes about 2 hours music of your Saturday. It means you never have to call a pest control company again. I want you to think about something for a moment. For 3 decades, I paid a stranger to come into my house and spray a chemical music I could not pronounce on the floors my grandchildren crawled across. I did it because someone told me that was what responsible homeowners did. Nobody told me that the woman who lived in my house in 1920 had a tin of white powder in her pantry that did the same job better for pennies with ingredients she bought from the same shelf as her sugar. That knowledge did not disappear by accident. It was replaced on purpose by people who profited from your forgetting. And tonight, after you watch this video, you will know something almost no one your age in America still knows. You will know how to do it yourself. If you have felt deep down that a lot of what we have been sold over the last 50 years was never really for our benefit, that the bills kept going up and the results kept getting worse and the trust kept getting smaller, then you already know what to do with what I just told you. You go make the mix. You stop paying. You take back the small piece of your home that was always supposed to be yours. And tell me one thing in the comments. What is the pest you have been fighting the longest, and how much money have you spent on it over the years? I read every comment on this channel. Ants in the pantry, roaches in the basement, silverfish in the bathroom, or something else. Be specific about the years and the dollars, because when you see the number written out, you understand what was actually taken from you. And subscribe if this gave you something real, because the next video is about something the Amish do with their wood stoves that eliminates the need for the electric humidifiers most American homes run all winter, and the document behind it goes back to an 1873 journal entry. We are putting the pieces back together, one buried document and one Amish kitchen at a time. Make the mix this weekend. Treat your house, and the next time the truck pulls into your driveway with a man in a polo shirt holding a clipboard, you smile, you wave, and you tell him you found something better. Something your great-grandmother used. Something that costs $2 and lasts a year. Something they never wanted you to remember. I will see you in the next one.